When my mother died, I thought the hardest part would be learning how to live without her. I was wrong. The hardest part came a few weeks later, when my brothers and sister sat around the same kitchen table where we had celebrated birthdays, shared Christmas dinners, and listened to our mother tell the same stories over and over again. That afternoon, nobody was crying. Nobody was remembering her. We were talking about the house. Our mother's house. The little white house where we had all grown up. The house with the old wooden floors, the narrow kitchen, the garden in the back, and the small bedroom where my mother had spent her final years. My older brother, Daniel, had a folder in front of him. My younger sister, Claire, had her arms crossed. My younger brother, Thomas, kept looking at his phone. And I sat quietly at the end of the table, holding the cup of tea I had made for myself. Daniel opened the folder and said, "We need to decide what we are doing with the house." I looked toward the kitchen doorway. For a moment, I expected my mother to walk in. She used to stand there every afternoon and ask, "Does anyone want tea?" But she was gone. And suddenly, the house did not feel like home anymore. It felt like something we had to divide. Daniel cleared his throat. "We should sell it," he said. Claire immediately agreed. Thomas nodded. I said nothing. Then Daniel looked at me. "What do you think?" I took a slow breath. "I don't think we should rush." Claire sighed. "We have already waited long enough." I looked at her. "Mom has only been gone 3 weeks. She looked away. That was the moment I understood something I had been afraid to admit. My siblings were no longer sitting at our mother's table as her children. They were sitting there as 4 people trying to decide who would get what. And somehow, without realizing it, we had become strangers. I wish I could say I knew then how badly things would go. I didn't. I thought we would argue for a few days. I thought we would calm down. I thought grief would bring us back together. Instead, our mother's house became the reason my siblings stopped speaking to me. And years later, I still remember the sound of that kitchen door closing behind me. Because that was the day I realized that sometimes people don't lose their family when someone dies. Sometimes they lose their family because of what happens after. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how my siblings turned against me over our mother's house. But it is also the story of how I learned that forgiveness does not always mean getting back what you lost. Sometimes forgiveness means finally letting go. My mother, Eleanor, was 82 when she died. She was not a famous woman. She never traveled around the world. She never had a large house or a great deal of money. She was simply my mother. And to me, that was enough. She spent most of her life in the same small town where she and my father had raised us. My father died when I was 37. At that time, my mother was only 60. She had been married to him for almost 40 years. After he died, I worried that she would not know how to live alone. But my mother surprised me. She grieved quietly. She kept his chair in the living room for years. She still bought his favorite bread, even though he was no longer there to eat it. And every Sunday, she placed 2 cups on the kitchen table before remembering that she only needed one. She never spoke much about her sadness. She simply carried it. That was my mother. She carried everything. She carried the bills. She carried the worries. She carried our childhood problems. She carried my father's illness. She carried the pain of losing him. And somehow, she still found a way to smile when one of us came through her front door. There were 4 of us children. Daniel was the oldest. He was 4 years older than me. He had always been the serious one. Even as a boy, he liked being in charge. Then there was me. I was the second child. Claire came after me. And Thomas was the youngest. When we were children, we were close. Not perfect. No family is perfect. We argued over toys. We fought over who got the bigger piece of cake. We blamed each other when something broke. But at the end of the day, we still slept under the same roof. We still ate dinner together. We still knew where everyone was. Our mother used to say, "One day you will all grow up and you will understand how precious these days were." We never believed her. Children rarely do. When you are young, you think your family will always be there. You think there will always be another Christmas, another birthday, another Sunday dinner, another chance to say what you should have said. But life doesn't work that way. Daniel left home first. He moved to another city for work. Claire married young and moved about an hour away. Thomas stayed close for a while, then found a job in another state. I was the one who remained nearby. Not because I was forced to. I simply liked being close to Mom. I had my own life. I worked. I had friends. I had responsibilities. But I visited her often. At first, it was once or twice a week. Later, when she became older, it was almost every day. I would bring groceries. I would clean the kitchen. I would sit with her while she watched television. Sometimes we said very little. We didn't need to. My mother and I could sit in the same room for an hour without speaking and still feel close. Daniel visited when he could. Claire called regularly. Thomas sent messages and came home on holidays. They all love Mom. I never doubted that. But loving someone and being present in their life are not always the same thing. That difference slowly became important. As the years passed, Mom became more dependent on me. Her knees hurt. Her eyesight became weaker. She forgot appointments. Sometimes she called me 3 times in the same afternoon because she could not remember that she had already spoken to me. I never got angry. At least I tried not to. I knew one day I would miss those calls. One evening, while I was washing dishes, she said something I will never forget. "Margaret?" "Yes, Mom." "When I am gone, don't let this family fall apart." I turned around. She was sitting at the kitchen table. Her hands were folded in front of her. "Why are you saying that?" She smiled. "Because I know my children." I laughed softly. "We'll be fine." She shook her head. "You say that now." I dried my hands and sat beside her. "We will be fine." She looked at me for a long time. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. "I hope you're right." I thought she was simply talking about death. I did not know she was also talking about everything that would come after it. Mom had always been careful with money. She and my father had never been rich, but they owned their home. They had paid off the mortgage years before. The house was not large. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small living room, a kitchen that had been remodeled once, many years ago, and a backyard where my father had planted an apple tree. That tree was still there when he died. It was still there when Mom died. The house had become worth more over the years. That was something I knew. But to me, its value was not financial. It was the place where my father had carried me after I fell off my bicycle. It was where Daniel had brought home his first school report. It was where Claire had cried after her first heartbreak. It was where Thomas had hidden under the dining table during thunderstorms. And it was where my mother had spent nearly her entire adult life. So when my siblings started talking about selling it, I felt something inside me break. I understood why they wanted the money. Daniel had debts. Claire was struggling with expenses. Thomas had recently bought a new home. None of them were cruel people. But grief can make people think differently. And money can make grief even more complicated. After that first meeting, we agreed to talk again the following weekend. I thought that would give everyone time to breathe. Instead, the week became filled with phone calls. Daniel called first. "We need to be practical," he said. "I know. The house is worth a lot." "I know. We could each get a good amount if we sell." I was quiet. Then he said, "You aren't planning to keep it, are you?" "I don't know." "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know yet." Dayton in sight. "You've been living around that house for years, Margaret. Don't let emotions make this difficult." I felt hurt. Mom was not an emotion. He became quiet. "I didn't mean it like that." "I know, but I did not know." "Not really." A few days later, Claire called. She was gentler than Daniel. At least at first. "Margaret, we need to think about all of us." "I am. I just don't want anyone feeling cheated." "Neither do I." She hesitated. "Mom left the house equally to the 4 of us." "I know. So we should divide it equally." I looked out the window. "Did she?" "What? Did Mom leave it equally?" Claire became quiet. "I thought she did." "So did I." There was another silence. Then Claire asked, "Why are you asking?" "Because I haven't read the will." Neither had they. Mom's lawyer had told us there would be a meeting after the funeral. That meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Until then, none of us knew exactly what Mom had written. That weekend, I went to her house alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I opened the front door and stood there for a long time. I could still smell her perfume. Her coat was hanging near the entrance. Her slippers were beside the chair. There was a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. I sat down. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I imagined her saying, "You're early." Then I whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't know what I was apologizing for. Maybe for surviving. Maybe for not being able to save her. Maybe because the house was already becoming a battlefield. I walked into the kitchen. Her blue cup was still beside the sink. I picked it up. I held it against my chest. And I cried. Not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that leaves you tired instead of relieved. That was when I heard a car outside. It was Daniel. He came inside without knocking. "I thought you might be here." I wiped my face. I needed to come. He looked around. So did I. We stood in the kitchen. For the first time in days, we were alone together. I thought maybe we could talk. I said, "Do you remember when Mom used to make pancakes on Sunday?" Daniel smiled. "Yes. She always burned the first one." He laughed softly. "She said she did that on purpose." She did. For a moment, we were children again. Two siblings standing in our mother's kitchen. Then Daniel's smile disappeared. "We still need to deal with the house." I looked at him. "I know." He nodded. "I just don't want us fighting." "Neither do I." "Then let's be sensible." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something had already changed. The following Monday, we met at the lawyer's office. There were 4 chairs in the waiting room. We sat apart from one another. Daniel was reading documents. Claire was checking her phone. Thomas kept rubbing his hands together. I stared at the wall. When the lawyer called us inside, I felt my heart beating faster. His name was Mr. Harris. He had known Mom for more than 15 years. He shook each of our hands. Then he sat behind his desk. "I know this is difficult," he said. Nobody answered. He opened a file. "Your mother left a valid will." Daniel leaned forward. Mr. Harris explained that the house was to be shared equally among the 4 children. Daniel nodded. Claire looked relieved. Thomas said nothing. I felt sad, but not surprised. Then Mr. Harris continued. "However, your mother added a separate letter." We all looked at him. "A letter?" "Yes." Daniel frowned. "What kind of letter?" Mr. Harris took out an envelope. It was attached to the will. My heart began to beat faster. He looked at all 4 of us. "Your mother asked that this letter be read after her death." He opened it. The first words were simple. "My dear children." I closed my eyes. Hearing my mother's words in that office felt strange. She wrote about the house. She wrote about our childhood. She wrote about our father. She wrote about how proud she was of all 4 of us. Then she wrote something that changed everything. She said that she wanted the house to remain in the family, if possible. She did not demand that we keep it. She simply asked us to consider it. Then came the part that none of us expected. She wrote that if one child wanted to keep the house, the others should first give that child the chance to buy their shares. I looked at Daniel. He was staring at the floor. Then Mom's letter mentioned me. She wrote that I had cared for her during her final years. She did not say I deserved more. She did not change the division. She simply thanked me. She wrote, "Margaret has given me many quiet days of comfort. I hope none of you ever make her feel ashamed for that." I felt tears come to my eyes. I looked down. Claire was crying too. Thomas wiped his face. Daniel remained still. Then Mr. Harris said, "There is one final request." He continued reading. "If Margaret wishes to remain in the house, I ask my other children to give her time to decide what she wants." Nobody spoke. When we left the office, the 4 of us stood outside. For a few seconds, we were silent. Then Daniel said, "So, what are you planning?" I looked at him. "I don't know." He shook his head. "You always say that." "I need time." "We don't have forever." "I know." Claire stepped between us. "Let's not do this here." We agreed to meet again in 2 weeks. But 2 weeks was enough time for everything to change. At first, Daniel called every few days. Then every day. He wanted to know if I planned to buy the house. I told him I was speaking with the bank. The house was expensive. I did not have enough savings to buy all 3 shares. I could take out a loan, but it would be difficult. Still, I wanted to try. Not because I wanted to keep something from my siblings. Because I wanted to keep Mom's home. I wanted to sit in that kitchen. I wanted to keep the apple tree. I wanted one place in the world where I could still feel close to her. I explained that to Daniel. He said, "You're thinking emotionally." Maybe I was. But wasn't grief emotional? Claire became less patient. One evening she called me. "Margaret, I need to know." "I am trying." "You have been trying for weeks." "I know. I have bills." "I understand." "Then please understand me too." "I do." "No, I don't think you do." Her voice broke slightly. "I love Mom too." "I never said you didn't." "Then stop acting like the house belongs more to you because you stayed." That sentence hurt because I had never thought that. At least, I never wanted to. I said quietly, "I don't think it belongs more to me." "But you act like it." "I was there because she needed me." "And we weren't." I had no answer. That was the problem. There was truth in what Claire said. They had not been there every day. But that did not mean they did not love her. Everyone loves differently. Some people call. Some people visit. Some people send money. Some people sit beside a hospital bed at 3 in the morning. None of those things are easy to compare. I said, "I don't want this to come between us." Claire replied, "Then make a decision." And she hung up. A few days later, I received an email from Daniel. He had already contacted a real estate agent. He said the agent believed the house could sell quickly. I called him immediately. "Why did you do that?" "We need to know what it's worth." "You should have asked me. We are all owners." "Mom asked us to give me time." "I've given you time. 2 weeks isn't enough." "It is enough." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Are you threatening me?" "No." "Then why does it feel like you are?" He was quiet. Then he said, "Because you're making this harder than it needs to be." I hung up. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the 4 of us as children. I remember Daniel teaching me how to ride a bicycle. I remember Claire brushing my hair before school. I remember Thomas sleeping beside me during thunderstorms. How had we gone from that to this? How could a house do this to people? The answer came slowly. The house was not doing it. The house was only revealing what fear had already created. Daniel was afraid of losing money. Claire was afraid of being forgotten. Thomas was afraid of being caught between everyone. And I was afraid of losing the last place that still felt like Mom. We were all afraid. And fear does not always make people kind. One Saturday morning, I went to the house and found Daniel and a real estate agent outside. I stopped at the gate. "What is happening?" Daniel turned around. "We're just getting an estimate." "You should have told me." "I did." "No, you didn't." The agent looked uncomfortable. I said, "Please leave." Daniel frowned. "You can't tell him to leave." "I can ask him to leave. He's here for all of us." I looked at the house. "No." Daniel's voice became harder. "Margaret." I had never heard him speak to me that way. I looked at my brother. "Don't." He stepped closer. "Don't what?" "Don't turn this into something it doesn't have to be." He laughed without humor. "You're the one turning it into something." I felt tears in my eyes. "I am trying to keep Mom's house. And we're trying to sell an asset." An asset. That word broke something inside me. I said it was her home. Daniel answered, "She's gone." The silence that followed was terrible. I looked at him. He looked at me. And I knew he regretted the words the moment they left his mouth. But he did not apologize. He simply walked toward his car. The agent followed him. I stood in the driveway alone. The wind moved through the apple tree. I put my hand against its trunk. And for the first time, I understood that I might lose the house. Not because I couldn't afford it. Not because the law required it. But because my own family no longer wanted to wait. That evening, Thomas called. "Are you okay?" "No." He sighed. "I don't know what to do." "Neither do I." "I don't want us fighting." "Neither do I." "Daniel thinks you're refusing to sell." "I am asking for time." "I know." "Do you?" He was quiet. Then he said, "I do." I asked, "What do you want?" "I don't know." "Do you want the money?" "Yes." His honesty surprised me. "I need it." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. But I don't want to lose you." I closed my eyes. "Then don't." We stayed on the phone for a long time. We talked about childhood. We talked about Mom. We even laughed once. It felt good. For a few minutes, I thought maybe things could still be fixed. But the next morning, Thomas sent me a message. He said he had decided to support Daniel and Claire. He said selling the house was the fairest choice. I read the message 3 times. Then I put my phone down. I did not respond. 2 days later, I received a letter from a lawyer. My siblings were asking for the house to be sold. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in front of me. My hands were shaking. I thought about calling them. I didn't. Instead, I called Mr. Harris. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Your mother's letter is important. Can it stop them?" "No." I swallowed. "Then what good is it?" He paused. "It tells us what she hoped for." "That doesn't feel like enough." "No," he said softly. "Sometimes a person's wishes cannot control what other people choose to do." I started crying. He did not interrupt me. After a while, he said, "Your mother knew her children." "What does that mean?" "It means she probably knew this was possible." I looked at the letter on my table. "Then why didn't she stop it?" "Maybe she knew she couldn't." That answer stayed with me. Mom had always understood that children grow into adults, and adults make their own choices, even painful ones. The next week was the hardest week of my life. I had to prepare for the possibility of leaving the house. I opened every room. I touched every wall. I looked through old photographs. I found a box of birthday cards, a wooden spoon with a crack down the handle, my father's old watch, my mother's recipe book. And underneath the recipe book, I found another envelope. My name was written on it. Margaret. I sat down. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. My mother had written it months before she died. She said she knew I was worried about what would happen after she was gone. She said she did not want me to sacrifice my life to keep the house. Then she wrote something that made me cry. "The house is only a house, sweetheart. What matters is what we gave each other inside it." I read that sentence again. Then again. She continued, "If your brothers and sister choose to sell it, do not spend your life fighting them. I would rather lose the house than lose my children." I covered my face. She knew. She knew. Maybe she had seen the tension coming. Maybe she understood her children better than we understood ourselves. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "Please forgive them if they hurt you. And if you hurt them, forgive yourself too." I cried for a long time, not because I had changed my mind about the house, but because I finally understood what my mother wanted. She wanted us to remain siblings, not owners, not buyers, not sellers, siblings. The next morning, I called Daniel. He answered after several rings. "Hello." "Daniel." "Yes." "I found another letter from Mom." He became quiet. "What did it say?" "I want all of us to read it together." There was a long silence. Then he said, "Okay." We met that evening. Claire came. Thomas came. Daniel came. We sat in the same kitchen, the same table, the same chairs, the same room where everything had begun to fall apart. I placed the letter in the middle. Then I read it aloud. Nobody interrupted. When I finished, Claire was crying. Thomas looked down. Daniel stared at his hands. For a long time, nobody said anything. Then Claire whispered, "I didn't know she wrote this." "Neither did I." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "I was angry." "I know. I thought you were trying to take the house." "I wasn't." He nodded. "I know that now." Thomas said quietly, "I feel ashamed." I looked at him. "Why?" "Because I chose money over us." I shook my head. "You were scared." "So were you." "Yes." Claire wiped her tears. "I needed the money." "I know." Daniel looked at me. "I still need it." "I know." That was the strange thing. The letter did not solve everything. Money problems did not disappear. The house did not suddenly become easy to keep. But the anger became smaller. We finally remembered that we were people before we were heirs. I told them I could not afford to buy the entire house. They understood. Then Thomas suggested something. "What if we sell it together?" I looked at him. "But we wait until we are ready." Daniel nodded. Claire agreed. We decided to keep the house for another 6 months. Not because we knew what would happen, but because Mom had asked us not to rush. Those 6 months changed everything. We cleaned the house together. We found old photographs. We divided personal belongings. We sat in the kitchen. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we cried. One afternoon, Daniel found an old wooden box. Inside were our childhood toys. He held up a small toy car. Thomas broke this. Thomas laughed. I did not. You did. You pushed me. Claire started laughing. I watched them. For the first time in months, I saw my brothers again. Not businessmen. Not heirs. My brothers. The people I had grown up with. The people my mother had loved. We still had disagreements. Of course we did. There were arguments about furniture. There were disagreements about repairs. There were moments when someone became impatient. But we learned to stop before things went too far. We started asking one another questions. What do you need? What do you think? Are you okay? Simple questions. But they mattered. Eventually, we decided to sell the house. It was painful. Very painful. The day the sale became final, I went there alone. I stood in the kitchen. I opened the cupboard where Mom kept her blue cups. Only one was left. I held it for a moment. Then I put it in my bag. I walked into the living room. I touched the back of my father's chair. I looked at the window. The afternoon sunlight came through just as it had for decades. I cried. But this time my tears were different. I was not fighting the ending. I was accepting it. Outside, my siblings were waiting. Daniel hugged me first. He whispered, I'm sorry. I said, me too. Claire hugged me. Thomas hugged me. We stood there together. For adults. For children. One family. And an empty house behind us. The money from the sale was divided equally. Nobody took more. Nobody secretly kept anything. And somehow that mattered. Not because the money was important. Because fairness gave us one final chance to leave the house without carrying another wound. Months passed. We slowly returned to our separate lives. Dana went back to work. Claire settled her bills. Thomas continued with his family. And I moved into a smaller apartment. It was not the same. It never would be. There was no apple tree. No old kitchen. No familiar hallway. No sound of Mom calling from another room. But I brought some things with me. Her blue cup. My father's watch. The recipe book. A few photographs. And the wooden box of childhood toys. I placed the cup on my kitchen shelf. Every morning I looked at it. At first it made me sad. Later it made me smile. Because I realized something. My mother's home had never really been the walls. It was the feeling she created inside them. The safety. The love. The patience. The ordinary moments. The meals. The arguments. The laughter. The forgiveness. Those things did not disappear when the house was sold. They came with me. They came with all of us. A year after the sale, we had Christmas together. It was the first Christmas in many years when none of us talked about money. We cooked together. We argued about the recipe. Thomas burned the vegetables. Claire blamed Daniel. Daniel blamed me. And we all laughed. At dinner, there was an empty chair. Mom's chair. Nobody sat in it. We left it empty. After dinner, Daniel stood up. He raised his glass. To Mom. We all raised ours. To Mom. Then he said she was right. Claire asked about what? He smiled. About everything. We laughed. But I knew what he meant. She had been right when she told us not to let the family fall apart. She had been right when she told us that the house was only a house. And she had been right when she asked us to forgive each other. Forgiveness did not happen all at once. It happened slowly. In phone calls. In small apologies. In Christmas dinners. In choosing not to bring up old arguments. In remembering that people can make mistakes without becoming bad people. Daniel and I became closer than we had been in years. Claire started calling me every Sunday. Thomas began visiting more often. We did not become a perfect family. There is no such thing. But we became a family that had learned something. We learned that grief can make people selfish. Fear can make people defensive. Money can make people forget what matters. But none of those things have to be the end of a relationship. Sometimes you have to step back. Sometimes you have to stop trying to prove that you are right. Sometimes you have to ask what the person you lost would have wanted. And sometimes the answer is painfully simple. They would have wanted you to love each other. Years later, I still think about that little house. Sometimes I drive past the street. The house has new owners now. The garden looks different. The windows have been painted. The old apple tree is gone. At first that hurt. But one day I drove past and smiled. Because I finally understood. The house had changed. But my memories had not. I remembered Mom standing at the kitchen table. I remembered Dad fixing the broken chair. I remembered Daniel teaching me to ride a bicycle. I remembered Claire brushing my hair. I remembered Thomas hiding during thunderstorms. I remembered all four of us sitting around that same table. And I realized that no sale could take those memories from me. No amount of money could buy them. No argument could erase them. They belong to us. All of us. Sometimes people ask me whether I regret not fighting harder to keep the house. My answer is no. There was a time when I thought keeping the house meant keeping my mother. Now I know that was not true. I did not lose my mother when the house was sold. I lost her when she died. But I carried her with me. In the way I make tea. In the recipes I still cook. In the way I fold towels. In the way I call my siblings even when I have nothing important to say. She is still there. Not in the walls. In us. And if I could speak to my mother now, I would tell her something. I would tell her that we almost lost each other. I would tell her there were days when I thought our family would never be the same. I would tell her that the house became a painful reminder of everything we were afraid of losing. But I would also tell her that we found our way back. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But we did. And I think she would smile. Because mothers often know things their children do not. They know that life is short. They know that money comes and goes. They know the houses can be sold. They know that furniture can be replaced. But once a family breaks apart, some things are much harder to rebuild. That is why I no longer think of my mother's house as the place we lost. I think of it as the place where we learned. We learned that inheritance is not only about what someone leaves behind. It is also about what they teach you while they are still here. My mother left us a house, but she also left us a lesson. And in the end, the lesson was worth more than the house. She taught us that love is not proven by who gets the biggest share. It is proven by what you are willing to give up to protect the people you love. Sometimes that means money. Sometimes it means pride. Sometimes it means being the first person to say, I'm sorry. And sometimes it means letting go. I think that was the hardest thing for me. Letting go. I had spent so much time believing that if I could keep the house, I could keep one last piece of Mom. But I was holding on to the wrong thing. The house was only a place. The real inheritance was everything that happened there. The laughter, the tears, the birthdays, the quiet mornings, the family dinners, the forgiveness. Those things are still mine. And they are still my siblings too. If there is one thing I would tell anyone going through a family inheritance fight, it would be this. Slow down. Before you ask what you are getting, ask what you might lose. Before you decide someone is selfish, ask what they are afraid of. Before you walk away from your family, remember that you may not get another chance to come back. Money can be replaced. A house can be sold. Furniture can be divided. But a brother is still your brother. A sister is still your sister. And when the person who brought you all together is gone, the last thing they would want is for their children to become strangers. I learned that the hard way. I learned it after my mother's death, after the arguments, after the phone calls, after the legal letters, after the tears, after the house was sold. And maybe that is why I am grateful for the lesson now. Because if we had never fought over that house, perhaps we would never have realized how far apart we had grown. The house exposed the distance between us, but it also gave us a reason to close it. Today, I still have Mom's blue cup. It sits on a small shelf in my kitchen. It is old. The handle has a tiny crack. The blue paint is fading. It is not worth anything. But every morning, I make my tea and hold it in my hands. And sometimes I whisper, thank you, Mom. Thank you for the house. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the letter. And most of all, thank you for reminding us that we were never meant to inherit a house. We were meant to inherit a family. And that is something I hope we never lose again. Because in the end, the house was sold. The money was divided. The rooms became someone else's. But my mother's love stayed with us. And perhaps that was the only inheritance that ever truly mattered.